We will never accept that Putin denies the very existence of Ukraine as a state and as a nation. We will never accept this threat to European security and to the very foundation of our international community. And I know that Canada's commitment is just as adamant as ours.
The European Commission chief addressing Parliament last night, President Ursula von der Leyen praised Canada's support for Ukraine against Russia's aggression. Her visit to Canada is aimed at strengthening transatlantic ties as the bloc continues to diversify its energy needs with a particular focus on clean hydrogen. She spoke with me earlier today in an exclusive interview. Madam President, thank you so much for coming in.
It's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'd like to pick up on something you said in your speech last night. You said that Europe will support Ukraine for as long as it takes. But I wonder, what if this conflict takes a much longer time? The West has already tapped out a lot of its military supplies, and the longer a conflict like this goes, fatigue can set in on the home front. What concerns do you have about a long conflict draining support for what's happening in Ukraine?
Well, first of all, we have to stand by Ukraine for as long as it takes, because Ukraine is not only fighting for its own sovereignty and freedom, but also it's a general fight whether we will respect the international law, whether we will uphold the UN Charter, or whether the right of might will rule the world. And therefore, it's principled that we stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes. What fatigue is concerned, it's amazing to see in the European Union the people have understood how existential this fight is. So we have the latest polls, quite a substantial support for what we're doing to support Ukraine, also the military capabilities we're delivering there. It's a question, I think, of general attitude and leadership to stand by Ukraine.
There's been this pattern over the past year, though, of allies initially denying Ukraine some of its requests for military aid and then months later delivering it. You think of the surface-to-air missiles as an example of that. Could the allies be more proactive in giving Ukraine what it needs to accelerate the defeat of Vladimir Putin?
I think, in general, this is a process, and we have seen it over the last month. As a European Union, we don't have any military capabilities, but what we do is we support financially. So we reimburse the member states by now 12 billion euros worth the reimbursement for military capabilities they give to Ukraine. And indeed, it is a process that has grown. I think by now, for example, the check-in with Ukraine, what they need, the clearinghouse mechanism, have got much, much better. But still, Ukraine needs more, mainly, for example, very simple things like standardized ammunition. And there we have to get better also to scale up our production.
Do you think the West is doing enough for Ukraine to win, or doing enough for them to hold on and avoid defeat?
Ukraine has to win because the international law and the UN Charter have to prevail. And therefore, it's not only the military capabilities, but, for example, there's a strong financial support to Ukraine. I know the European figures. It has been 67 billion euros of support so far. It is caring for the Ukrainian refugee. Canada is doing an outstanding work with that. For example, caring for Ukrainian refugees here in Canada. It's a lot of repair that we do in Ukraine because Russia is targetedly attacking the civil infrastructure. So all this is the whole package of support that is necessary.
Hanging over all of this are warnings from the United States that China may be poised to provide military aid to Russia. I know Chancellor Scholz has said that he's been assured by Beijing that this isn't the case. What do you think China's intentions are when it comes to Russia and Ukraine?
We are watching very carefully what China is doing. So far, we have no indication that they are delivering weapons. They are delivering goods. But in general, we have not forgotten that 1 or 2 weeks before Russia invaded Ukraine, China and Russia have signed a so-called unlimited partnership. So China has chosen the side where it wants to stand. And this is always to be taken into account.
The U.S., though, the last time it went so public with intelligence warnings like this was when it was telling the world Russia is going to invade. They were right then. Should we doubt the accuracy of their intelligence now about China's intentions?
Oh, I think this is something that the United States have to decide. But indeed, before Russia invaded Ukraine, the United States did something completely unusual, indeed, to put intelligence information on the public market, if I may call it that way. But it was good at that time really to warn us ahead of time. So this, for example, brought along that as European Union since the beginning of the year 2022, so 2 months before the invasion, we started already to align with our American friends and Canadian friends on shaping sanctions against Russia. So the message was very clear also to Russia: if you're invading Ukraine, this will come at massive cost. And this is what happens today.
Well, what's the message to China on that point? I mean, you were instrumental in driving sanctions inside Europe. I mean, are you prepared to take on a similar role against China? Should China defy the U.S. warnings and get involved in a much more robust way in supporting Russia? And maybe they aren't telling the Chancellor the truth on what their intentions are. Are you prepared to go as far as sanctioning Russia if necessary? Or China, I mean.
So I think we should always look at what is happening on the ground. And therefore, the sanctions right now are targeting Russia without any doubt. But China is watching very carefully what we are doing. And I think it's also a message that we do not tolerate that nowadays you try to change borders by force, as Russia has done with sending tanks, missiles and drones over the border into Ukraine.
You've spoken on this trip about Europe's need for critical minerals and the role that Canada can play in that, but Europe currently gets about 98% of its minerals, as I understand it, from China. Is Europe in a similar position in relying on China for minerals that it was in relying on Russia for oil and gas?
So in some critical minerals, yes, not of course in the whole range of critical minerals, but some, yes. And it's almost the other way around. China has since 20, 30 years strategically bought mines all over the world and really has implemented the processing of critical raw materials in China. So nowadays we have this high dependency. And we've learned our lesson. We've learned our lesson from the high dependency on Russian fossil fuels. That was unhealthy. So here, looking at critical raw materials, we have to diversify. We have to strengthen our supply chains. And here, Canada is, of course, our first natural partner, because Canada is a like-minded country. Canada has these resources. Canada respects labor rights. Canada is environmentally protecting while mining. So all these are points that really speak for Canada, and we want to intensify the relationship.
When Europe needed natural gas, though, Canada wasn't able to directly meet the demand because of a lack of capacity and infrastructure here, in particular on the East Coast. And Canada's critics internally have said our climate policies and our review process left us unable to meet Europe's needs. What's your sense on that?
Canada helped indirectly because Canada stepped up its production overall. And we had a situation when Russia cut the pipeline gas to Europe, 80% of the pipeline gas they had sent to Europe. The overall energy supply on the global market was very tight. And here, Canada helped indirectly by stepping up, increasing the LNG production. This freed more resources in different regions of the world and gave us the opportunity to buy LNG on the global market, so to help us in a very critical stage.
Right, they helped you indirectly, but it would be preferable, I wonder. You talk about Canada being a natural partner for all the reasons you outlined, but to have direct shipments of Canadian liquid natural gas going to Europe, would that not be a preferred outcome?
That would be interesting, but it has to be a business case. So it's the companies who have to decide on that one. What is more important is, over time, this is now the acute crisis reaction. Over time, we will go, and we are going deep into renewable energy. And here also, Canada is a prime partner. If you look at hydrogen, for example, this is the topic for the European Union. We will import a lot of hydrogen, and here a natural partner again is Canada. So we are working now on a memorandum of understanding with the Canadian government, specifically for hydrogen, because this is the mid and long-term partnership and relationship we want to build. On
the critical minerals, though, there's an urgency to accelerate the green transition. The industry here, while the potential is significant, it's in its infancy, right? In a lot of cases, the projects haven't moved far along. The processing capacity isn't quite yet developed. I wonder, can Canada meet Europe's needs on a timeline that Europe needs? Well,
I think strengthening and diversifying our supply chains means to have several prime partners. So it will not only be Canada, but what was very interesting yesterday here in Canada, I was visiting a company that is recycling old batteries and getting out of them again the lithium, the nickel, the cobalt. So also these innovative steps in not only mining and processing, but also reusing critical minerals is extremely important for us, because over time the world will need critical minerals and more critical minerals to boost the green transition. And these innovative steps like the recycling of batteries are things we are very interested in.
Just one final point. You were with the Prime Minister yesterday when he was asked questions about Canada's response to allegations of foreign interference in Canadian elections, notably by China. I'm not going to ask you to talk about the specifics of that, but I just wonder, this is not an issue that is unique to Canada. This is a global challenge. How do you think democracies need to respond to these challenges of meddling in democratic processes by authoritarian states?
Foreign interference is absolutely unacceptable. They are threatening all democracies. We all have to fight the foreign interference. And also in the European Union, we're setting up the structures to dismantle foreign interference, to find out about it, and to create more resilience against it. Here in Canada, I'm deeply convinced that the institutions are strong and will deal with the matter. It's the same for the European Union. We know that this is an increasing worry, and we really have to get prepared for that and to strengthen our own resilience.
Do governments need to be more transparent with their citizens on what the threats are and how to spot them and how to prepare for them? Because national security always plays a role in this, top secret information and intelligence gathering. But do governments just need to be more clear about what's happening?
Well, this is very difficult to judge on in a general basis, because sometimes you have sensitive information where you're not sure about the validity, for example, or the sources. So it's a very fragile ground, if I may say so, and you have to decide on case by case. What is happening since years now, and that is good. There is much more transparency, because you see that in the public debate. The public debate is fed by the information that around the globe we are all gathering on foreign interference, which is not something which is open on your plate, but where you have to work hard to get the information that it exists.
Okay, President von der Leyen, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much.